You're taking the ACT really soon. Maybe it's in 2 days, maybe it's in 2 hours, but what are some last minute tips that actually work? That's what we're going to talk about in this video. My name is Brooke. I wrote 2 math books for the ACT. I've been coaching this test for over 2 decades. And in my experience, what you can get to in a small amount of time that's usually pretty useful is what I'm going to go over. 10 things. We're going to start with English. We're going to end with science to hopefully help you in this process. Number 1, let's start with some English. Don't read the grammatically acceptable question stems. Now, some of you are like, Brooke, what the heck is a question stem? A question stem is just the wording of the question itself that's next to the number. You can see it here. And on the ACT, it used to be that a lot of questions didn't have a question at all. And the ACT just told students, hey, the default is pick the best grammatical answer choice unless there is a question, right? And then for the here, I'll read it for you guys. I shall get out my book and read it for you so you know what I mean by this question stem. Which choice makes the sentence most grammatically acceptable? That didn't take very long, but imagine multiplying that by 30. That's going to take a couple of minutes off the time that you have to answer questions on the English section. And while a lot of students don't feel super rushed, there's no reason to put yourself in a position where you might be. So my advice on these, what I tell my students to do is just skim your eyes to the right side for each question and quickly glance over and see if you see that word grammatically, because it lands sort of on the right side of the column, as you can see here. If you see that word grammatically, don't read the question. Just pick the best choice grammatically. So it's just a quick little speed tip to save yourself like 2 minutes on the English section. And that maybe is 2 extra points if you get 2 more questions right. Second tip is when you have a question stem that isn't that which choice makes the sentence most grammatically acceptable. You are not supposed to just put what sounds best. You need to do whatever the question asks you for. And this is one of the #1 mistakes that my students make who I start prepping with. And it's such an easy fix. And that's why this is a last minute ACT tip, because it's something that's super easy to correct if you're just aware of it. If it says which choice is clearest and most precise in context, the idea of being really clear and really precise is super important. So I want it to be really clear and really precise. That's the most important thing. I don't care even, and this bugs some students, sometimes if I see like which choice best helps indicate that each historical epoch covered different subject matter, I need the answer choice that does exactly what it asks for. I don't care if the answer choice sounds like it was written by a 3rd grader. That's not what this is about. This is not the most grammatically correct. This is not which of these sounds the best. It is very specific to whatever that question stem says, and you need to pay attention to that, and that wins above all. So if you understand that and know that, it's just going to help you make choices that help you get things right. And it's a very simple concept, and so great to cram. Number 3. If you're trying to up your English score and you don't have a lot of time, I will just tell you from working with students for 2 decades, the #1 kind of question that my students miss in the English section are punctuation. Colons, dashes, semicolons, and commas. So if you only have time to study like one thing, that is what I would study. I would study punctuation. And as a gift to you guys, I have created a punctuation cheat sheet. So if you don't even have time to Google, how to use a comma videos on YouTube right now, and all you have time for is to print something out before you run to your ACT test center, we have you covered. You can find it at SupertutorTV.com/free. We'll also put a link in the blog that goes with this video that you can find a link to in the description for this video. And that will give you my quick rundown of comma, colon, dash, and semicolon rules. But again, going through a whole lesson on that might be worth it if you've got a day or 2. So my tip number 4 is a math tip. And that is learn to use your calculator. You don't have a lot of time to run a lot of like math drills and like deeply learn concepts that you don't know very well, but you do have time to learn a few tips and tricks on your calculator. What can you do on your calculator? Really quickly, you can multiply, add, and subtract matrices. You can run simple programs. We actually have a whole package of simple programs, and we have a video on how to put programs on your calculator, which you can check out on our channel here. Find greatest common factor or least common multiple. There's a particular kind of problem that these land on. but that's fun. You can run permutations and combinations, NPR, NCR, in the probability functionality of your calculator. You can solve expressions with I. If you don't know where the I is on your TI-84, I recommend that you Google it and figure it out, because if you have any questions that have I in it, it makes it so much easier. You can graph complex equations and solve by graphing. One of the things that happens to a lot of my students is we have these complicated questions, and my rule of thumb is anything that's like more complicated than a quadratic, about 70% of the time I'm using graphing to solve it. So if you have something that has like crazy weird exponents, if it's got like the third or fourth power and it's starting to get complicated, graph the thing and pluck points to find the zeros instead of trying to factor something that's ridiculous and difficult. It's also multiple choice, and so you can back solve from the graph and things like that. But the more complex the question, if you're trying to solve something, remember you can solve by graphing, and anything really complicated, it's a really good move. Another thing you can do is you can convert fractions to decimals and decimals to fractions. If you don't know how to do that, you hit math, you hit frac on the TI-84 and enter. Super easy. That's how you convert to a fraction. You can also convert back to a decimal from that same math menu. If you click the math button, play around with it, pretty easy to learn. You can also find the sine, cosine, and tangent of anything. So as I like to say, if you have a problem that's got a bunch of sines and cosines in it, and you're not quite sure how to do it the right way, but you've got some angles and you're like, oh, if the sine of x equals the cosine of 90 minus x, like what is the value of blah, 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 right? Something like that. Make up some numbers, use your calculator's built-in functions to figure it out if you don't know immediately the answer. That's just a quick rundown of some of those features on your calculator. So again, I recommend that you get to know your calculator, download some programs if you've got a TI-84. My second big tip is study formulas. So the SAT has this lovely little cheat sheet that reminds you of the Pythagorean theorem and the area of a cylinder. The ACT has no such thing, guys. You are totally on your own. And there is nothing worse than when my students get an ACT question wrong because they couldn't remember the law of sines, or they couldn't remember the law of cosines, or they couldn't remember, worse, the Pythagorean theorem. I really don't want that to be you. And so I have a present for you. A math cheat sheet. You can also find that at SupertutorTV.com/free reading. My first tip for the reading is this is not a closed book test. Many of you enter the world of reading comprehension like you do in high school, which is my teacher assigned me this reading assignment. I have to read it at home, then I have to come to class. I have to shut my book and remember everything and then answer all the questions. It's not how the ACT works, guys. It's open book. So I want you to treat this test differently if you're not doing it already. And that means every time you're reading a question, it's open book. Go back and check your answers. Do not guess, you guys. Go back and check, go back and check, go back and check, go back and check. Go quickly, but go back and check. Because there's something going on in the ACT. And that something is that every answer choice usually mentions something from the passage. Most of the time in high school, you have these recognition tests where the goal is, let's prove that you read, let's prove that you knew that the character wore yellow boots, right? And so they'll put the yellow boots, and when you see the yellow boots in the answer choice, you go, I remember reading that. And your whole goal on those tests is just, I remember reading that. I remember reading that. That's not the ACT. There is a question. It's a specific question. It isn't, do you remember reading this? That is not the question, you guys. Do not replace whatever the question is with that dopey question. You want to go back, you want to figure out what is the answer, and then you want to put that answer, okay? So in order to do that more effectively, we're going to get to my tip number 2. My second tip, it is really great for the majority of my students to do what I call a map of the passage. Your goal when you first read an ACT passage, you don't get any brownie points for reading every word on the ACT, by the way. You get points for getting questions right. So because we're going to go back, right? Because that was my first tip. You want to read the passage in a way where you summarize each paragraph so you know what kind of information is in each paragraph, so you know where to go when you need to double check your answers. The other thing that I remind students of when you're mapping a passage is you don't want to get bogged down in any one section. You may get bogged down in an area that doesn't make sense, but that area may have 0 questions on it. And then you just wasted like a minute and a half trying to understand 3 lines that don't matter. So before you do that, what I always tell students is when you're mapping a passage, yes, you want to summarize, but if something's confusing, then I want you to back up and just think what is where. What kind of information is here? Oh, she's fighting with her dad about something. I don't understand that. Okay, but that's fight with dad. So if you get a question about her fighting with her dad, you know where to go. And that's what's most important. Knowing where to go is more important than memorizing everything as you read. And if you make that adjustment, you're going to be able to be more accurate and still keep within the time on the ACT reading section. So those are my 2 big ACT reading tips. Now I have 2 tips for the science section. My number 1 tip is literally my number 1 tip. And if you've watched my videos, you've heard it already. So I'm not going to take a lot of time, but it is do not read the passages first. Chances are you're not going to be able to memorize all of the things that those science passages say. I do have some students who that idea makes them really nervous, and so they will read just the first 2 lines or so just to get a little bit familiar with what in the world is going on and what kind of experiment this is. If you feel like you're in that 10%, fine, do that. But for 90% of my students, they don't read the passage first. They get into the questions first, and then they figure out what am I looking for, and then they go and find it in the charts, in the graphs, in the experiment, and then you read when you need. It doesn't mean never read the passage. It just means get to that reading when you need it, because the science is so technical and so specific. It is literally nearly impossible to memorize unless you have the memory of an elephant, which some of you might. Number 2, check off every detail and track every detail as you go. So in terms of process on the science, and science is great because you can really improve your score a lot just by changing up your process. Your pencil is your BFF if you're taking this on paper. If you're not taking it on paper, you can still use the highlighter to do this. What I want to do is I want to make sure that I don't drop any details as I go through my question. I even recommend that students read the question a chunk at a time, and you never read beyond what you can hold in your brain and really comprehend. You don't want to get to the point where you read the question and you're like, that was a bunch of gobbledygook. I have no idea what I just read. And that can happen on the science because it's so detail oriented. So I read a little detail. It says, according to figure 1, I go to figure 1. Okay, there's figure 1. Okay, I know where I'm going. The number of tadpoles that survived in the experimental pond was, right? And then I stop and I say, okay, number of tadpoles in the experimental pond. I go back to the graph and I say, okay, where are the tadpoles? Where are the experimental pond? Okay, I know where I am, right? And I go off and I check off each detail and I check off each detail. And that helps me make sure that I don't miss anything, that I don't look at the wrong figure, that I don't look at figure 3 instead of figure 2, because the label of the figure 2 was like, I thought it would be below and it was above, or right, whatever it is. That could confuse me. So check off every detail, track every detail as you go, digest it one little bit at a time, right? Stop and go back, and just digest it. Make sure you don't miss anything in that question on the science. And that's going to help you get a better score, being careful. Finally, I have one last tip, and this is for all the sections. And that's take a real practice test and go over your answers. If you've already done this multiple times, pat yourself on the back. Yay, you're on your way to getting a better ACT score. If you haven't done it yet, it's one of the most important things you can do to familiarize yourself with this exam. There are 2 that have been released by ACT, I think, at this point. There's 4 in this book. 1 used to be repeated with one that was available for free from ACT. I think they've just added a new test, which of course is a lot of questions that have been recycled from past guides if you studied for the earlier version, but hey. In any case, you've got 4 in the book. You've got 1 online for now in 2025, and hopefully they're going to be adding more to the book each year and more online to practice with, but practice with real materials. You can also use legacy ACTs to practice if you can get a hold of them. There's old legacy guides, and if you look at my Amazon reviews, you might notice Brooke Hansen is an avid Amazon reviewer of the ACT official guide. I will go through all of the form codes in all my Amazon reviews of like which tests are in it. So if you're trying to get some more practice tests beyond the ones that have been recycled into this, I literally go through form codes and I can tell you which tests are in which guides, and you can kind of piece it together and order some more of those gently used books from Amazon to get more practice for yourself. But yeah, practice tests, go over your practice tests, figure out what you missed, why, and how you can do better next time. If you want any support with this, we have tutors, we have an online video course, like I said. You can learn all your grammar rules there. And of course, we have our free resources on supertutortv.com/free that I've talked about in this video, as well as our YouTube channel. Please subscribe if you've made it this far. We'd love to help you with this process. Go crush your ACT. Thanks for watching, guys.